Hello and welcome to the Deep Dive Perspective, a show in which we showcase those people who tell the truth and actually get punished for it. All too often, the kind of people that we focus on are being penalized by not only the state and the state system, but also by the establishment and the institutions that surround it. Today is no different. Tony Greenstein is my guest, and I'm delighted to welcome him. He's an author. He's a left-wing activist for decades. He's been in hot water over all sorts of issues, but he's also a founding member of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and indeed has also been involved in Palestine Action, which is the focus of my discussion today. Palestine Action, of course, have been proscribed just earlier this month, and they are essentially a terrorist organisation according to the British law. Well, Tony's going to hopefully help us to unpack that, but also contextualise it with other persecution, I think I can call it, of himself directly as well. Tony, welcome to the show.
Yes, welcome. Thank you very much for inviting me.
So, Tony, first of all, your overview on Palestine Action. We've now got an organisation which essentially has committed no violent action against any individual. They've never hurt anybody, but for carrying out criminal activities, admittedly, around the country, primarily against Elbit, the Israeli arms company, based on their genocidal actions, as Palestine Action would argue. They've been now proscribed on the same level that you would be if you were a member of ISIS or if you were a member of Al-Qaeda. Give me your overview on this, please.
Well, it's obscene, of course, to compare Palestine Action, which is trying to prevent a genocide in Palestine, with ISIS, which tried to commit a genocide. So it drains terrorism of all meaning. All terrorism today means is somebody that the British government doesn't like. Somebody or something or some organisation which has a position which is opposed to British foreign policy. For instance, in Turkey, the Kurdish Workers' Party is prescribed as a terrorist organisation, even though it has never operated on British soil, and its enemy is the semi-fascist government of Erdogan. So that's one example. Another example, of course, is Hamas, which also has never operated on British territory, but is opposed to and resists the occupation of Gaza. And for that, it's been prescribed. And there is no justification for that either. So there are just two examples. It's drained terrorism of all meaning. And most people understand what terrorism is. It's wanton attacks on civilian targets, civilians who are innocent, children, women, etc., in order to pursue your own objectives, whatever they may be. And there's no one who is more guilty of that than the Israeli state, which is a terrorist state, but it's been given carte blanche to do what it wants.
Well, some powerful comments there, which I'm going to unpack because they all deserve a little bit of attention. Your origin is Jewish. You've written a book called Zionism and the Holocaust, I believe. You've been
during the Holocaust.
Yeah, and your father, I believe, was on the front line of battling the fascists, Mosley, no less, in the east of London. So you're no stranger to taking on injustice at a high level. But you talked about this notion of a draconian measure. You wouldn't have expected Britain to have gone down this route. We espouse freedom of speech, we espouse liberty, and all sorts of other human rights, policies around the world. And here what it seems is that we're doing quite the opposite. How have we got to this stage? Because there are so many laws on terrorism which have been implemented, but why is it so easy to turn them on what seems to be just an organisation which has a political stance and carries out a few criminal offences? How has terrorism got involved in this equation?
Well, we're in a different era, I guess. We're in an era where we play a handmaiden almost to the United States. Whatever the United States foreign policy is, we're with them. That's British foreign policy. It really is to allow no daylight between you and the United States. And the United States gives full some backing to the Israeli state because it sees Israel as performing on behalf of the US foreign policy in the Middle East. Israel is, in a sense, the projection of Western imperialist and the United States power in the region. It's an important region. It's got lots of oil. It's a strategic region midway between Europe and Asia. And the role of Israel is to subdue the Arabs or keep them in fealty or link with the Arab regimes and create an economic union and a bulwark against the peoples, the Arab masses. So that's how we've got there. And it's been going on for some time with the war against terror at the beginning of the 21st century, where terror has been redefined in the wake of 9/11 in particular. But the 2000 Act, of course, was passed even before 9/11. So it's been a quarter of a century or more of a war against terrorism, which is nothing of the sort.
Well, you were very much at the heart of Palestine Action when it was perhaps formed. I think it was around 2020. And in fact, you've gone to court as well. I just recently discovered, which is fascinating, that they took you in front of the courts, and there was, I think, a 9-month suspended sentence that was imposed at that time, and you're still being targeted. I mean, I think you're on the 24th of November. You were charged, or sorry, in November 2024, you were charged with terrorism offence under the Section 12 of the Ter-rorism Act. Tell me about the context of that, because, you know, an author, an activist, you don't strike me as a man who's going to be going out carrying any explosive, terrorist activities. How have you ended up in this situation?
Well, I mean, firstly, I wasn't in at the foundation of Palestine Action. In fact, my involvement with it is fairly peripheral, but I was asked to drive a van to take activists to the Shenstone factory in Walsall, and I agreed, and we were intercepted by the police, and I was arrested. So really, that is all that is, nothing more. And yes, I've received a 9-month prison sentence. But on the 20th of December 2023, I was arrested at home by about a dozen from the anti-terror police, on the basis of a tweet that I had posted a month before, when a Zionist said to me, "Just say Hamas." And I said, "I support the Palestinians, that's enough, but I support Hamas against the Israeli military." So I was quite specific in what I said. And for that, I was arrested. So it's kind of Orwellian, really. They're arresting you for thoughts, for what you believe. Now, I mean, so Britain is on the road to a police state, and Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper, who've prescribed Palestine Action, are busy taking us into that state. They have nothing to say. They have nothing to argue. They've got no agenda. They've got no perspective or vision, except to give the state more powers to clamp down on those who oppose them. And that's the reality.
Well, it's pretty clear that, saying anything that even vaguely, exonerates Hamas, even though we know that in international law, people whose land has been taken, who are being attacked by an oppressive imperialistic force, have the right to self-defense. That's absolutely clear. Yet we have a law here which proscribes Hamas and Hezbollah, etc. They would say that we're fighting resistance wars against occupier armies, but our government doesn't seem to look at international law, but they've imposed their own laws, which essentially make it impossible for anybody to even talk about those organizations in terms of resistance groups.
Well, that's right. They are prohibiting free speech, and they're penalizing free speech. And that really is what it's about. I mean, if the laws on prescription had been available and enacted 30, 40 years ago, it would have been a crime to have supported the African National Congress in South Africa, which was the world's other apartheid state. So really, we've come quite a way in the last half century, so that supporting the Palestinians is deemed to be no less than terrorism, even though it's plain to most people that it's the Israeli state that engages in terrorism.
Well, the thing is that it was quite ironic that on the day that they were announcing the proscribing of Palestine Action, it was actually the anniversary of the suffragettes in Britain,
Yes.
a women's movement that basically carried out violent actions, far more violent than anything Palestine Action did. And yet here was the bizarre irony that in a 21st century Britain, we were doing something to an organization which we'd have basically essentially done to the women's movement, which created the liberation of women in the West.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. The suffragettes had a bombing campaign against Lloyd George and his fellows. I think 4 people were killed in that bombing campaign and others injured. They smashed windows, they destroyed property. And yet Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary who's banned Palestine Action, counts herself as a supporter of the suffragettes, because it's easy to support a direct action group a century after it existed. So she is a pure hypocrite, nothing more. As are the others in the British cabinet today. If they support the suffragettes, then they have to support Palestine Action.
Well, I've seen that the response to all this, other than yourself and who people would say, oh, well, here's an individual who's clearly, in their eyes, to the shallow-minded, that you're a troublemaker, that somebody who challenges systems and takes them on for the sake of it, according to the naive. The reality is, though, that now 83-year-old women are being arrested outside, Parliament and Whitehall by police officers based on these rules, and that they've basically been taken to task under Ter-rorism Act. So this lady, this 83-year-old priest, I think with the Church of England, was literally being ushered away, others carried away, and that's resulted in nearly 100 or so arrests already. What does it make you feel in terms of where Britain is heading now? We already have talk of surveillance states and, the ideas of Agenda 2030 and bringing in more surveillance to be able to control society. Does it worry you, the trajectory we're on, and what can be done to counter it?
Well, yes, of course, it does worry me immensely because Britain is shedding its democratic facade. I mean, it's never been a truly democratic society in which everyone has an equal say and share in power. We always know that the Rupert Murdochs of this world carried far greater power than individual citizens, even though he himself is not a citizen. But even the pretense, even the sugarcoating of a democratic society is now being dissolved. It's naked state power. And you see the Metropolitan Police leading the attack. I mean, there are some laws that they don't implement. So there's in 2001, the International Criminal Court Act was passed. Section, I think it's 51, 52 and 3, make it a crime to participate in or aid genocide or war crimes. Yet they haven't lifted a finger, because it's not in their interest to do so. Or you can have more mundane examples. Fox hunting was outlawed in about 2007, yet the police haven't strained a muscle to implement it. So they pick and choose what laws they want to implement, and they're in line with the ruling class's dictates. So how do we combat it? We have to build big movements and take to the streets and say we won't comply. And that if a law is unjust, it's morally right to oppose it, as Martin Luther King said. Whereas you have to obey laws which are just, it's a moral imperative not to obey laws which are unjust. And this is recognised. I mean, there were laws forbidding gay rights, for example, before 1968. I mean, today everyone disavows them, but at the time they were in operation. I mean, there's all sorts of laws which have gone by the way, and these laws will as well. They'll be seen for what they are. They're the product of really little reactionaries who have nothing else to say.
Well, I was doing the homework on some of the alleged crimes of the British government in terms of military supplies to Israel, which is what actually irks Palestine Action. The fundamental raison d'etre for Palestine Action was the Israeli arms industry, which is located here in the UK. And they've been constantly targeting those kinds of sites. Elbit, I think, systems is one of the ones, the primary one for Israel. And there's talk of course, not just talk, it's the reality that the F-35 systems for the F-35 US aircraft are manufactured here. There are there's all sorts of clear evidence now that the British government, I think they've about 14 shipments of military supplies have entered Israel since 2024, I think it is. And they've also talked about, 160,000 military items in one consignment. So that's a huge amount of arms and military supplies that the British government has been given to a government which they know is killing children daily. So do you think that Palestine Action's activities of painting, aircraft and maybe smashing some of their factories or entering illegally some of those factories, do you think that's morally justified?
Well, it's certainly morally justified. I would also argue it's legally justified because there is a law of duress, basically, which says you can commit a smaller crime in order to prevent a larger crime. And that's what Palestine Action was doing. And it's very clear that Elbit is enabling genocide quite directly. So anything that is done to stop them operating is lawful. Of course, the Court of Appeal has reversed that because it's filled with reactionaries like Lady Carr, for example. So it's a political decision on the part of the judges, who are the most reactionary section of the population anyway, to scrap the most ancient defences. So it is a political battle.
As far as your stand goes on Israel, I mean, another thing I can cite is the fact that the ICJ has essentially declared a genocide, really, in all but, I think, legal paperwork.
Yes, it said that it was plausible that a genocide was being committed.
So,
I think one should be very critical of the ICJ for the fact they've taken so long to actually wake up and declare it is a genocide. And they've given Israel 6 months extra to kill people in Gaza while they present a defence. And I think that really is indefensible. So people shouldn't fall over themselves to praise the ICJ.
Yeah, the ICJ, of course, even with the little that they've done, that should have been, I guess, enough for a British government which says it's an adherent to international human rights laws, etc., the Geneva Convention, the UN Charter's various pronouncements on war and killing of children, etc. Yet what we've got is a government which is still dragging its feet because the arms supplies, which they say they've banned, are still going. That's another thing with, I think, David Lammy has been exposed for lying, because he said of the 14 licenses, I think, that they've taken away, they've actually, they claimed it was going to be to stop offensive weapons, but the defensive weapons are fine, and there's still 200 licenses which are intact. So are they just using this as a camouflage to actually still supply weapons to Israel, and then at the same time prosecuting Palestine Action as terrorists?
Yes, I mean, it's what they've done is absolutely tokenistic. In fact, they've sent more weapons than the Tories did in the last 3 years. So everything they say is lies, and Lammy is just a contemptible rather, individual who has no morals, no ethics, and no beliefs that he isn't willing to jettison. I mean, he calls himself a Christian, but I mean, I don't think he follows in the footsteps of Jesus somehow.
Again, the IDF have soldiers who have British citizenship. It's been reported and I think confirmed that many...
Yes, they should be arrested and prosecuted under the law.
You think they should be arrested?
Of course they should be. They're murderers.
So the IDF soldiers, essentially, if I was an ISIS conscript and I went out to Syria these days, I mean, Giuliani, who is an ISIS conscript, seems to be on great terms with David Lammy, who's been shaking his hand as well. So there's more hypocrisy which is unfolding there. That you've got Palestine Action fighting for kids in Israel being proscribed as terrorists, and the actual declared terrorist, somebody who was overseeing the butchering and head chopping of Syrians for many, many years, is being welcomed back into the fold. What kind of bizarre political dystopian reality are we entering?
Well, it just proves that Western imperialism has no morals, no ethics. It's concerned really with the bottom line, which is, if you like, the stability of oil supplies in the Middle East. And therefore all its nonsense about wars for democracy and against terror are just rhetoric, which is devoid of all meaning. Yes, in Syria, Giuliani was deputy head of ISIS in Iraq, and then head of Al-Qaeda in Syria. So, I mean, you couldn't make it up, really. Since they haven't been prescribed, or deprescribed rather, Lammy is committing an offence. But no doubt the Attorney General will overlook that particular offence.
I was interested to see that, of course, there is a lot of fragmentation. There's a lot of falling away of support. You know, the cover that Israel used to have and the British government used to provide, or the Americans did. It's clear that after what's happened with this genocide, there has been a pretty seismic shift in terms of the way public view Israel. Certainly in this country, Britain, 60 to 70% are against the actions of Israel and have an unfavorable view of Israel's policies. The Jewish community, even in this country, is clearly divided. In America, I know that 60, 70% of Jewish youngsters have turned on Israel as well. But in Britain, it's really interested me that a very stoic supporter of Zionism, of Israel. I think the Board of Deputies of British Jews here have had around about 30 people, 30 plus members who've walked out, it may be 31 I think, who actually have been essentially, I think, suspended for objecting to the board's unmitigated support for Israel. As a Jew living in Britain, how do you feel about this kind of shift? Do you think that's something that's going to continue?
I'm sure there has been a shift in the Jewish community. It's hard to say, but certainly younger people are turning against Israel in a way that they've never done before. The Board of Deputies, which only has ever represented a minority, 30% of British Jews, today is nothing more than an Israeli propaganda organisation. And yes, it's based on the most reactionary and conservative section of the Jewish community, those who go to the synagogue. But even there, 10% more, 36 people signed a letter. I mean, it wasn't a brilliant letter, but for them, it was a step too far. One person has resigned from the board altogether. I think 3 have been suspended from the board. You can be a bigot or an Islamophobe or a racist of any nature, but if you oppose what Israel has done to the Palestinians, then that's a step too far for Phil Rosenberg and the Board of Deputies. They're really just genocide apologists.
So, moving on to your own personal situation, Tony, you're up for trial pretty soon, and they've done something novel, something new that I hadn't noticed before, which is again quite frightening because they seem to have delved into your bank accounts, and they can seem to have influence over your building society accounts. What's going on there? Is this a new action, or is it something that's the service, the deep state, or the British intelligence services, or the police do on a regular basis to people? Why have they gone for that?
Well, just today, the same has happened to the Greater Manchester Palestine Solidarity Committee. And I know at least one woman who's suffered the same fate as me. Basically, they are waging a war against Palestine activists, and there's no trickery, no depth to which they will not sink. So an unknown state body has contacted banks, and two of them have debanked me, basically. So it is becoming very difficult to operate in the world that we live in, but we have to survive somehow, and I will survive somehow. I won't let it get me down. But the bastards are operating in the way that they do because they know they have nothing to say out in the light. So they operate really in the darkness. That's all I can say.
It's a time then, I suppose, that those who are part of the Palestine movement against all this tyranny, against Israel, if I take your argument on face value and say that all this is a persecution and a witch hunt of anti-Zionist or pro-Palestinian activists, then of course it's arguable that that movement should stay united. I have picked up murmurings where there have been allegations and accusations amongst these organizations. It may be very minor, but do you think it's a time for all of the anti-Zionist movement to unite and not to splinter perhaps and stand solidly and firmly together to fight, or is that something that you think might be fragmenting within the anti-Zionist movement, or is that wrong? Is that a completely wrong assumption?
No, I'm not aware of this fragmentation, but I'm always in favour of unity, but unity around a purpose. Unity for its own sake tends not to mean anything. But there is a wider Palestine solidarity campaign. In fact, Britain's Palestine Solidarity Campaign, which supports the Palestinians but isn't anti-Zionist, and that is when we have our disagreements,
right?
Because they're very cautious and very conservative. And they announced just before the prescription that they would implement the ban on Palestine Action, whereas any organisation worth of its salt would have led the campaign of defiance. So I think their behaviour has been absolutely criminal, and Ben Jamal has led that. And I think it's absolutely disgraceful that they've pulled up the white flag at the first sign of opposition, the first whiff of grape shot. So there are times when, of course, you have to disagree because they are over fundamentals, but I don't support trivial differences over particular tactics. No.
One of the big names at the head of this organisation, my final point, is Jeremy Corbyn, and he's now at the heart of the potential new party of the left, a party of the left which will be viewed, again, for its position on Palestine. Jeremy Corbyn himself was witch-hunted on the basis of anti-Semitism, as I think you were as well within the Labour Party back in that time. Do you think Jeremy will be able to handle the new sort of party in a slightly more robust manner than perhaps he did as a leader of the opposition? Or am I being too harsh on Jeremy there? Because many say he capitulated in front of the Zionist lobbies and actually didn't put up a fight effectively enough.
Yes, I mean, his leadership of the Labour Party was little short of abysmal. He did not give a lead. He was not a leader. He appeased the right, he appeased the Zionist lobby, and I was one of those. I was the first Jewish person to be expelled as a result of that anti-Semitism smear campaign, but I wasn't the last, of course. And Jeremy never got it. And part of the problem is Jeremy, although he's always been a supporter of the Palestinians, doesn't even understand what Zionism is. He's never been an anti-Zionist, and that is his problem. And at the moment, I must confess, he has all the appearances of dithering once more because Zara Sultana has resigned. I think she's very good to have done so. It was the right step at the right time. And now is the time to give a lead. But Corbyn has been, from all the reports, not terribly enthusiastic. And he's had his time to do that. And he's had his time to think about where to go, but he has fluffed it to date. And really, the time is ripe now, not tomorrow, now. to actually form a party of the left, which can be a challenge to Starmer's Labour, the Tories, and Reform most of all. And basically, Jeremy Corbyn needs to get his act together. He's not a hero if he just leads people to defeat. He was appalling when he was leader, because he never seemed to understand what was happening. And he needs to actually turn over a new leaf. It's good he's been elected as an independent. Now he has to put that to some good use.
My final question, I could go on and on with that question, but maybe another time now. But my final thought goes back to Palestine Action. Where is the future for Palestine Action and that kind of direct action kind of movement? Do you think it will continue, or has the government basically killed it?
No, I don't accept the government's killed it. As long as there's a need for that action, it will happen. Whether it's Palestine Action or some other group like Yvette Cooper, as one group has been named, we shall have to see. But no, I don't think it's the end of direct action, although our government would very much like to do it, because they'd like to squash any sign of protest wherever it occurs, because they are fundamentally police state Democrats, as they used to call them in the United States. They're not genuine believers in democracy and don't believe in the right to protest, and that's why they're introducing yet another new law to clamp down even further.
Well, thank you very much, Tony Greenstein. And that's all we have time for on this deep dive perspective. A fascinating journey into not only an individual's struggle against a government and a nation which is supposed to be the upholder of freedom of speech, the mother of democracies, and yet what we've got is a reality which is very, very different. What on earth is going on in Britain if we can't even say what we want and we can't protest? It means really that we need to take more action to win back the rights that we have. Perhaps we ought to be doing a lot more of what Palestine Action used to do, but that would obviously get us in an awful lot of hot water. Reality is, though, that individuals are suffering. Tony Greenstein, of course, is just one example of this. What does the rest of Britain think? Are we just going to sleepwalk into a dystopian kind of Big Brother surveillance capitalism where we're cowed into silence simply because the state decides that something is terrorism because they say so? And today's terrorism for them is Palestine Action carrying out a few minor acts of vandalism. Tomorrow it could be me perhaps walking down the road and even having certain thoughts, because we've got that whole neurotechnology and the transhumanist wave coming as well. We really need to hold power to account. The only way that can happen is if we sustain our democracy, sustain the accountability of those in power, and that requires our alertness and to wake up and to stand up for those who are being persecuted today, because it's a slippery slope when you allow people to be unjustly proscribed and prosecuted and committed to prison or worse without any just cause. Thank you for watching this edition of Deep Dive Perspective. Please don't forget to hit the like, share and subscribe button, and also a thanks button. Do have a little look at that, because we need your support. We're not able to continue these kinds of shows and bring on these voices who are usually censored and blocked out on mainstream media because of the fear of establishment of hearing the truth. So if you want to hear the truth and you want to keep channels like ours alive, then we'd like you to put your supporting finger on those buttons, but also to try and help us support us in any other way that is possible. Thank you for watching Deep Dive Perspective.